If you were to ask any average Joe about the lost cities of gold, he would probably tell you that it was El Dorado. And if you ask a regular Jinn about it, she'd probably say something like, "Ooh, is that the one with the sparkly trees?" It's true that both those things are associated with the legend of El Dorado, but neither of them is actually the city itself. El Dorado isn't so much a place as it is an idea that for over 400 years has inspired exploration, conquest, and murder across 2 continents. In fact, the only reason we even know about El Dorado today is because it inspired one of the greatest myths ever written by the great Sir Alexander von Humboldt. Now let me introduce myself. I'm the host of this channel. These are my expert picks. And today we are going to talk about El Dorado. Okay, so we all know that there's no such thing as unicorns or the Kraken or my cousin Jeff, but El Dorado is kind of in a league of its own. Even though it may not be real, it's still one of the most influential legends in world history. When I say that, I don't mean that people used it as an excuse to do horrible things, because that's just sad. What I mean is that it changed the way Europeans saw the world, and it led to some pretty cool discoveries. So you might be wondering, how can something fake be so important? Well, let me tell you about what's arguably the most famous story ever told about El Dorado. Sir Alexander von Humboldt was a German-born explorer who spent much of his life traveling around South America. In the early 1800s, he wrote a book called The Kingdom of New Spain, which contained a detailed description of the geography and natural history of the Americas. He included everything he learned on his travels, like how to cure snake bites and the location of gold mines. But he also wove in stories from local legends, like when he described the legendary city of El Dorado. The myth goes something like this. Deep in the jungles of Colombia lived a tribe of people who covered themselves in gold dust every day. They believed that their king was a god who lived in a palace made entirely of gold. One day the king decided to hold a festival where all the people would cover themselves in gold dust and parade around the city. The first person to reach the center of the city would become the new king. So the people ran as fast as they could through the streets, slipping and sliding in the mud, until finally, bam! Someone tripped and fell into a river and washed away. The current was too strong for anyone to save him, and he disappeared into the jungle. Only one person had ever seen the Golden King since then, a passing Spaniard who was blinded by the sun reflecting off of all the gold. But he described what he saw to the Spanish conquistadors, who set out to find the glittering city. But they never did. Now the weird thing about this story is that while the characters and events are completely made up, the places aren't. There really is a river in Colombia named the Dorado, which translates to the Gilded One. And there really is a legend about a tribe of gold-covered people living in the jungle. That part is completely true. It's just the details that are wrong. The Muisca people have been living in this region for hundreds of years before the Spanish ever arrived. Their capital city was called Bocata, which later became Bogota. Every year they held a festival where they would cover themselves in gold dust and throw parties. It's kind of like Mardi Gras, except with more gold. One day, a Spanish conquistador came across the festivities and demanded that they show him where all the gold came from. They told him that they got it from a nearby lake called Guatavita, which the Spanish believed was the mythical El Dorado. So they spent 20 years trying to drain the lake and find the fabled golden city. But all they found were some rocks. Turns out the Muisca people got their gold from rocks, too, specifically a rock called emeralds. Emerald is the green version of beryl, which is already a green version of something else. And even though you might think that this emerald sounds like a magical artifact from Lord of the Rings, it's actually just a common mineral. You can get them from rocks all over the world. But the Colombian emeralds are some of the best in the world, which is why the Spanish were willing to spend 20 years looking for more of them. Now, even though the Spanish failed to find the golden city of El Dorado, they did find some really nice emeralds. And when word got back to Europe about these sparkling stones, everyone went crazy. For centuries, people thought that precious stones like diamonds and rubies could actually improve your health. So everyone started wearing emerald rings and necklaces like it was the latest medical cure. Emeralds were even ground into a powder and mixed into drinks. Of course, this caused a shortage of emeralds very quickly, so the Spanish began searching for other sources. Problem was that the Muisca people didn't have any extra emeralds. They used them as currency. So if the Spanish wanted emeralds, they had to buy them, which meant that they needed gold. So the conquistadors struck a deal with the king of the Muisca people. He would give them as many emeralds as they wanted. if they gave him an endless supply of gold. And being 16th century conquistadors, they were very trustworthy. The next time the Spanish came across the Muiscas, they said that they had brought the gold, but it turned out to be worthless. So the Muiscas refused to give them any emeralds. This was unfortunate because at this point, the Spanish were really starting to freak out about not having enough gold. See, after draining the lake, they started to realize that maybe El Dorado wasn't real. But the thing was, no one wanted to admit that, because if they admitted that, then they had wasted 20 years looking for nothing. So instead, they concocted a plan. I'll stop. Oh, that's 1 minute. See you tomorrow.